Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to the next episode of the Academy Critic. In this one, we're going to be looking at the 63rd Academy Awards, which honors films released in 1990. And we have a unique start for this one because unlike the past episodes, I've actually seen one of the shorts. So we're going to be actually starting with the category Best Animated Short Film. The three nominees are Grasshopper's Cavalette, A Grand Day Out, and Creature Comforts. Now, the only one I've seen is A Grand Day Out. Now, this is a film that I kind of grew up on. Love Wallace and Gromit. Love Aardman, really. But Wallace and Gromit and Shaun the Sheep are the two that I really grew up watching. And this is, I believe, the first Wallace and Gromit movie, actually. It shows a little bit just with the animation isn't quite, the stop motion that isn't quite as smooth as it would grow to be in some of the future projects, but ultimately that just kind of ends up adding to the charm of this movie. This is a really charming movie. I really like it. Just a lot of fond memories for me. So to see it here was kind of a surprise, but a really fun one at that. Okay, so the nominees for Best Original Song are Somewhere in My Memory from Home Alone, Promise Me You'll Remember from The Godfather Part 3, I'm Checking Out from Postcards from the Edge, Blaze of Glory from Young Guns 2, and Sooner or Later from Dick Tracy. So the only movies I've actually seen here are Home Alone and The Godfather Part 3, but I did listen to Blaze of Glory and Sooner or Later, and I must say, I think Blaze and Glory is a much better song than Sooner or Later. Sooner or Later from Dick Tracy is what ended up winning, but the guitars in Young Guns 2, in Blaze of Glory in Young Guns 2, a much groovier jam in my opinion. But let's talk about the movies that I've actually seen, starting with Home Alone. So this, I believe, is the first time we've actually talked about John Williams. We're going to get used to it. We're going to be seeing a lot of John Williams on this channel. He's amazing. But we're not even talking about score right now. We're talking about song. However, the song Somewhere in My Memory from Home Alone does use the melody from the score of Home Alone, which is just fantastic. So it's obviously my favorite song here. It's the one that I would have picked to win. The main thing I believe that's holding it back from getting the win is just the fact that the song is really short. It's barely a minute long, so I can see the Academy wanting to go for something longer, but this is my personal favorite. Now let's talk about Promise Me You'll Remember from The Godfather Part 3. So I don't even really remember when this song was sung in the movie. It may have been during the credits, actually, because I do remember there being a song over the credits, but I don't really remember what it is. Overall, that's kind of all I really have to say about this song. It's simply not as memorable as Somewhere in My Memory, or even Blaze of Glory for that matter. All right, moving right along to Best Original Score. The nominees are Home Alone, Havana, Ghost, Avalon, and Dances with Wolves. Now, really quickly, I want to mention a couple of snubs here. Edward Scissorhands has a really nice choral score from Danny Elfman, which is really good. And also, I do like the music from Back to the Future Part 3. Not the whole score, but the main Back to the Future Part 3 theme sounds really great, but not that either of those movies would probably end up winning. Let's talk about the first nominee that I've actually seen, which is Home Alone. We've kind of already talked about it a little bit. The melody that they use for Somewhere in My Memory is present throughout the movie and is really great. Also, the use of bells gives it a uniquely Christmas sound, which is super duper fitting. The best songs from this score that I'd recommend are the main title and Mom Returns and Finale. Mom Returns and Finale is a particularly great one. That's my favorite. It's really where John Williams shines the most. This is a great score. I think this movie actually ends up getting pretty overlooked when you look at John Williams' score filmography, just because he has so many amazing scores that he's done apart from this, but I think this is an absolute banger. All right, now moving along to Ghost, this nominee makes no sense to me. It sounds like a very generic, generic. It's boring. You could take it and pretty much put this movie's music over any random thriller, and it would pretty much do the job and nothing more. It's not really drawing any attention. The only part of the film's music at all that really perked my ears up was the Unchained melody at the end, but that's not even original to this film. It's just a song that exists that they used in the movie, so that doesn't even count. That's not even part of the original score. So what is this movie here for? Good question. I honestly do not know. I don't think it deserves it. Okay, now let's talk about the winner of this award, Dances with Wolves. This one, this has a very dramatic score, probably the most dramatic here, at least of the nominees that I've seen. It's got really good use of its orchestra that complements the film's thematic and visual beauty. It just matches the film's energy really well. The best song is the John Dunbar theme by John Barry. Go listen to that because it's really, really good. I wouldn't have complained if Home Alone won, but I'm also not going to complain that Dances with Wolves won. It really deserves it. It's a great score. Next up, we got sound effects editing. The nominees for sound effects editing are Total Recall, Flatliners, and The Hunt for Red October. Now, just want to mention real quick, there's a couple of sound awards at this point. It's sound effects editing and then just sound. Later on, the Academy ended up having it be sound effects editing and sound mixing, which they changed that and now they're back to just sound, but I just had to address it real quick just so that we know what we're talking about. Sound effects editing is how this, not the sound itself, but how it's compiled in to the movie, and then sound mixing, which isn't even part of this ceremony but will be in the future, has to do with how the sound mixes within other sounds. It's a little, I don't think they should have separated it as much as they did, but here we are. So without further ado, let's talk about Total Recall. I don't have any real complaints for the sound effects editing in Total Recall. This is the type of movie you expect to see in this kind of technical award. Sci-fi, action-packed. It flows really well. I'm never taken out of it by the sound editing. So yeah, it's good. It deserves to be here. But the winner of this award is The Hunt for Red October. And I'm glad that this one won because I do think it's doing something a little bit more interesting with its sound effects editing specifically. Primarily because it can cut from within a submarine to outside the submarine, and it has to kind of shift the sound that's going on based on the water and how that might muffle the sound. It just kind of plays around with it. Submarine movies like Greyhound and Das Boot, they all really have great sound design, and The Hunt for Red October is no exception. Now, the nominees for just Best Sound are Total Recall, The Hunt for Red October, Dick Tracy, Days of Thunder, and Dances with Wolves. Let's talk about Total Recall. This movie ends up dealing with, futuristic machinery, weaponry, technology, so it has a lot of good opportunities for unique sound design specifically, and it does do a really good job. Some of what I will say, the parts that do take me out a bit more are some of the hand-to-hand combat. It's just very lazy sounds that feel repetitive and generic, but most of the sound in this movie is very, very, very good. All right, now let's talk about The Hunt for Red October. The same thing I said about using the water still applies here, whether it's the crew singing, whether it's the sound of the engine itself, whether it's the sound of torpedoes blowing up underwater. The sound never really disappoints. It does do a very effective job. All right, now, Dances with Wolves. So Dances with Wolves sneaking the win is a bit of a surprise just because it was completely absent from the sound effects editing category, yet got the win in Best Sound overall. That being said, it does have really good sound. Whether there's the battle sequences, like the Civil War battle in the very opening scene with all the shooting, but then some of the American Indian Wars battles at the end of the movie, and then there's also the buffalo chase, the bison chase, where you got the sound not just of shooting, but of the people and obviously the herd itself. It flows really, really great. It all sounds good, but I'm just surprised to see this at the top instead of something with a bit more of a unique opportunity for sound involving more technology, something like Total Recall or The Hunt for Red October. But all of these movies do have really good sound. Okay, now we have a Special Achievement Award for visual effects, and that went to Total Recall. So this is pretty cool. It's not too common that we see a Special Achievement Award, because normally there's just like a list of movies nominated for the award, and then they kind of compete for which one gets the most votes. But instead of having that, they just made they just gave the Special Achievement Award to Total Recall without having it have to compete for it. It would obviously win. I can't really think of another movie that came out this year that would really beat Total Recall. It definitely has the best visual effects. The landscapes it creates, and also there's a lot of great visual effects in the movie. It's hard to like kind of narrow it down. Some of the ones that stand out the most is they made kind of an Arnold Schwarzenegger prosthetics for stuff that couldn't be done with an actual actor. Sometimes you can tell when you look at it, you're like, okay, that's not really Arnold Schwarzenegger, but overall, it's actually very impressive work, and it's really cool that it got this recognition. The Godfather movies always have this golden hue to them, which is really nice. It looks good, and I think that this one in particular, it complements the production design particularly well. One thing I will say is that I didn't notice in this one as much use of mise-en-scène to use framing to give visual storytelling as to the power dynamics that are at play in this one, as much as the prior two Godfather movies did. But where I think this movie's strong points are is its use of silhouettes. There's just a few shots in this movie that make really good use of them, that when I think of this movie cinematography, those are the first things that come to mind. But yeah, not a badly shot movie. Cool to see it here. But the winner of this award is Dances with Wolves, and I think a lot of the beauty of this comes from the natural landscape. They're filming the American frontier, and it looks beautiful, obviously, but it's also shot with a great sense of tact. It also uses silhouettes really, really good, but it uses sunrises and sunsets, just the hues and the lighting that it uses and takes advantage of. It captures the natural beauty. Just because there is natural beauty doesn't mean that the cinematography is relying on that without putting its own, work into it. It's shot in a way that captures the beauty and really transfers you there. The movie looks absolutely beautiful. I'm very glad that it's here, and I'm very glad that it won. Okay, the nominees for Best Art Direction are Hamlet, The Godfather Part 3, Dances with Wolves, Cyrano de Bergerac, and Dick Tracy. Just want to mention a couple of snubs here that I'm not surprised didn't make it, but I wanted to mention them because I think they do a good job here, even though I've only seen 3 of the nominees. Edward Scissorhands has really unique production design, and Back to the Future Part 3, they kind of made like the whole town, I'm pretty sure. So they both have a really good job. But let's talk first about The Godfather Part 3, which largely takes place inside Vatican City. Now, I believe they requested to film in Vatican City, but they were denied access, so they had to kind of reconstruct some of the interiors. And I actually thought while I was watching the movie that they did film in Vatican City. And I've been in Vatican City. It's beautiful, and it is extravagant. Some of the most gorgeous interior, architecture that, you'll really ever see. So the fact that I thought it was legit just goes to show that they actually did do a really committed job in carrying their production design over. So yeah, The Godfather Part 3 does have a really good production design, deserves to be here. Alright, now let's talk about Dances with Wolves. So yeah, the Native American campgrounds look very real, very lived in. Same goes for the town, and also the building that John is staying at while he's on the plains, on the frontier, before he befriends the natives. All feels very lived in, very real, very good. But my favorite set is from the opening scene. Now, when you're watching this scene, you will notice, there's like a house there, and there's like a fence, and that kind of seems to be it. But I was looking at some behind the scenes stuff, and the attention to detail that went into this set particular is crazy, because there's like a forest there that they're kind of fighting in. That's all planted. You think it's like, oh, there's just a forest there that they filmed at or built the stuff around it. No, they liked that location, so they planted trees there and grew them. And on top of that, they wanted it to look like it was taking place in the fall. So they painted all of the leaves of these trees. And you don't even notice it. That's how good it is. It really just disappears because you just think it's a naturally occurring forest that is in the fall, but no, it's planted and painted to look that way, and it does a really good job. So I was very impressed with Dances with Wolves' production design. Very, very good. Now, when it comes to Cyrano de Bergerac, I don't have as much to say. It all looks really good. Both the segments at home where the town they're living in look great, but also the battle sequences when they're fighting in the war look awesome. Ultimately, this is the type of genre, the period pieces, you expect to see in the production design category, and Cyrano de Bergerac does not disappoint on that regard either. It definitely fits in. The nominees for Best Costume Design are Hamlet, Dick Tracy, Dances with Wolves, Avalon, and Cyrano de Bergerac. Let's start off with Dances with Wolves. One of the cool aspects of the costume design in Dances with Wolves is that it not only has to match a specific time period, but also cross cultural boundaries as well. So it has to depict both realistic and believable and practical clothing that the Native American populations would wear, but also the stuff that the Confederate and Union soldiers are wearing as well. And I think it does a really effective job portraying both of these. While the stuff that Dances with Wolves, the costumes that Dances with Wolves has going for it is great, it's hard to match those of Cyrano de Bergerac. Cyrano de Bergerac, the clothes people wear in this movie, they're much more extravagant, they're much more in-depth and impressive, more flashy, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're better, but in this case I do think they are, and it's cool to see this movie win. Alright, now moving on to Best Makeup. The nominees are Edward Scissorhands, Cyrano de Bergerac, and Dick Tracy. Now, before we get into those, I want to talk real quick about a couple of snubs here that have really good makeup. First of all, Dances with Wolves does have really good makeup, but the real snub here is Total Recall. That movie has some real standout makeup. Very surprised to not see it here. But let's talk about Edward Scissorhands. Now, I gotta say, this is before the makeup award was makeup and hairstyling. It was just makeup, which is a bit of a shame because this movie, in certain scenes, most scenes, is almost more impressive with what it's doing with the hair. That being said, the makeup is quite good. Whenever people think of the makeup in this movie, most of the first thing they're gonna think of is Edward himself, the makeup that Johnny Depp has on. And obviously looks good, the scars look good, he's pale. Nothing too crazy, if you ask me. But the stuff that impressed me the most was the makeup that Winona Ryder's character, Kim, the stuff she had on in the opening and closing scene when she's, the old woman. I actually had to Google, is this Winona Ryder? Is she playing her, or is it actually just like an old woman? Because the makeup is very, very convincing. So I think that's actually where, although that's not what most people are going to associate this movie's makeup with, that's what I think is giving it most of this nomination. I think that's the most impressive makeup in this movie. Now let's talk about Cyrano de Bergerac. I really don't know what to say about this one. There's some blood, in some of the battle sequences, I'm pretty sure. But the real makeup that stands out is Cyrano's nose, which, looks great. Totally compelling, very convincing. But that's kind of it. And overall, it's just a bit underwhelming when you look at some of the non-nominated movies like Total Recall, which have more going for them, I think. Moving on to film editing, we have The Hunt for Red October, Goodfellas, The Godfather Part 3, Ghost, and Dances with Wolves. The Hunt for Red October follows both a submarine and the pursuers of that submarine, and it has to cut kind of between them, making sure you're not staying with one for too long to kind of keep the whole chase scene interesting. After all, they are traversing the entire ocean pretty much. However, on a more micro scale, on a smaller scale, like within the scenes, some of the intensity and some of the suspense gets really amped up by the editing, just because you kind of are being shown what's going on outside, but you're mostly just there with the characters who can't see what's going on, so you can't show too much of what's going on outside because the characters don't really see what's going on. So you kind of have to balance that out to put the audience in the shoes of the characters, and kind of let the editing really does kind of take the reins on that one and does a good job making those intense scenes, more suspenseful than they would be otherwise. All right, now Goodfellas is a movie that hits the ground running and just keeps rolling along the whole time. From the opening scene, you're invested, and then the editing, it carries you through the story so easily up until the very end. Ultimately, it just makes the movie so watchable. That's largely what a good editor can do is like with a badly edited movie is just sucks to watch. A well edited movie, very watchable. Goodfellas, probably the most watchable movie here. It's probably got my favorite editing here, because you're going through this person's entire life, and it's kind of got to choose which parts to like really dwell on, and then which parts to also not spend as much time on. So it's got to spend more time on the important stuff. And I know that's largely a screenplay thing more so than it is an editing thing. We'll get to that later. But top to bottom, the movie's editing is great. Okay, The Godfather Part 3 is in an interesting situation for me. I gotta say right off the bat, I watched the Coda version, which came out a few years back. It's like Francis Ford Coppola's final, edited version that more so matches his initial vision of the movie. While I've heard people say it's like the better version, it's better than the theatrical version, the Academy is judging the theatrical cut. So I can't, in complete honesty, judge this too fairly, since I watched a re-edited version. But most of the editing in this movie is the same. This movie gets rid of the beginning. It cleans that up and starts later on. And it also changes the ending. Now, to be fair, I did go back and I watched the opening of the theatrical cut and the ending so that I kind of, know what I'm talking about. But even in the Coda version, I feel like the ending, when I say the ending, I don't mean the final act. I actually quite liked the final act, but the last like 5 or so minutes felt a little rushed to me. I simply don't think that the movie spent enough time building up to what it was doing for me to have the emotional reaction that I think it wanted me to. But like I said, I can't fully judge the editing on this one until I actually watch the entire theatrical cut. But that's just my opinions on it. Okay, Ghost. The editing here didn't really stand out to me. It's nothing too crazy. It's not sloppy or anything, but it wasn't that memorable. I just don't have much to say. I don't know if the editing here was Oscar worthy. Let's talk about the winner of this award, Dances with Wolves. I'm not surprised the Academy went for this one. I think it's the longest movie here. It's like 3 hours long. It is the more grand, epic, large in scale movie that tend to be really well edited, and this movie is, and it's something that the Oscars like to go for. And this is a good one. Although I do prefer Goodfellas' editing, this one has more spicy action sequences, in particularly the bison hunt, which I already talked about earlier. I'm probably going to talk about it again later. You never know. It just keeps you engaged. It's exhilarating and exciting. This is a really well edited movie. Alrighty now, the nominees for Best Actress in a Supporting Role are Mary McDonnell in Dances with Wolves, Diane Ladd in Wild at Heart, Lorraine Bracco in Goodfellas, Annette Bening in The Grifters, and Whoopi Goldberg in Ghost. Okay, starting off with Mary McDonnell in Dances with Wolves. This is where I kind of got to be honest and say it has been several years since I have watched Dances with Wolves. So the details of McDonnell's performance are somewhat lost on me. This is a movie that I once again, I don't think I can fully give a great in-depth analysis of her performance when it's simply been a bit too long for me to really remember the details of it. I wanted to rewatch Dances with Wolves for this video just because it's a really good movie and it had been, I think, enough years to justify it, but that didn't happen for me this time, I'm afraid. Okay, now in Goodfellas, Lorraine Bracco plays Karen Hill, whose life is pretty sad to watch, honestly, just because it starts off so innocent and normal, and then because of Henry's decisions ends up kind of crumbling under the deception and gangster life that he's leading because she's kind of part of the mafia. She plays off Ray Liotta really well. She's honestly giving a bit of a better performance than he is, although I think her main standout scene is the scene where she stands up to him and she's got the gun to him. If you've seen the movie, you know the scene I'm talking about. If you haven't seen the movie, what are you doing? Turn this video off and go watch Goodfellas. It's amazing. But yeah, kind of being outsiders of the gangster world, us, the audience, we're kind of largely seeing the movie from her perspective. Even though she's a supporting role, we kind of can understand her naivete and innocence at first, which eventually start falling apart due to her husband's decisions rather than her own. Okay, now Ghost. I actually didn't know that Whoopi Goldberg was an Oscar winner, but she won for Ghost. I don't know if she's won for anything else, maybe. But she's pretty funny in this movie. She plays this like fraud medium who ends up actually being a legitimate medium. And overall, it's more so a comedy performance than anything else, which, it's cool. It's cool to see those win. They don't usually get this much recognition at the Oscars. But it is unfortunate that she won it over, I believe, a deeper, more introspective, and more deserving award like for Lorraine Bracco. Yeah, she's who I would have picked. But Whoopi Goldberg is memorable, yeah. Now, the nominees for Best Actor in a Supporting Role are Al Pacino in Dick Tracy, Graham Greene in Dances with Wolves, Andy Garcia in The Godfather Part 3, Bruce Davison in Longtime Companion, and Joe Pesci in Goodfellas. I just wanted to mention Robert De Niro in Goodfellas, just because he's doing a great job, but I understand him not being here just because it's very similar to a lot of the roles he plays. This is a role that feels kind of tailored to him to the point where it's a performance we've seen De Niro give many times. He just happens to be very, very, very good at it. But let's talk about Graham Greene, which is unfortunately kind of the same situation with Mary McDonnell. Being supportive roles, they just have not as much of a presence compared to like Kevin Costner for me to really remember the depths. I do remember them being good in this movie, but in terms of, their, I remember their personalities, but in terms of giving like a deeper analysis of their character and the way it's portrayed, it's been too long since I've seen the movie to give a genuine one, and I'm not going to fake it. So let's move on to Andy Garcia in The Godfather Part 3, who I think is giving probably the best performance in the movie. He's got to play off of Sofia Coppola, which is like a really hard thing to do given her performance, but he's giving it his all. First of all, he's got this like look, like, I mean, the black slick back hair, like he just looks like a Corleone. He looks like he belongs in the Godfather movie, and he really shines in this movie. Especially, he's playing Sonny Corleone's son, and he matches his father's like volatile nature really well. He mirrors it great. That was one of the like defining characteristics of Sonny's character. So seeing Andy Garcia kind of carry that on is pretty good. Okay, now Joe Pesci in Goodfellas is the winner of this award. And in a movie full of great performances like Ray Liotta, Lorraine Bracco, Robert De Niro, Joe Pesci remains the most memorable. I mean, if you thought Andy Garcia was unpredictable and volatile and had an explosive character, wait till you meet Tommy DeVito. You can't tell if he's joking, if he's being playful, or if he's genuinely angry. The scene that best summarizes character is the funny how scene. When that's pretty much the first scene that we see him. His character is so off-putting, yet it's unpredictable but also so believable and realistic and entertaining, and it's just he's such a unique character, and Joe Pesci just plays the heck out of him. He totally deserves this award. He made a super memorable character in this movie. Yeah, definitely deserving of the win. Moving on to Best Actress in a Leading Role, we have Joanne Woodward in Mr. and Mrs. Bridge, Meryl Streep in Postcards from the Edge, Julia Roberts in Pretty Woman, Angelica Houston in The Grifters, and Kathy Bates in Misery. Let's talk first about Pretty Woman. Julia Roberts is honestly the anchor of this movie. Although she's playing a hooker, she's actually quite charming and very likable. Unlike her male counterpart, he's honestly really just there for the plot to move along. She, on the other hand, is actually giving us a character to root for, and her performance actually really makes the whole movie work. Without her, it would fall apart. So yeah, Julia Roberts is great in this movie, but not as great as the winner of this award, Kathy Bates. So Stephen King has said that Kathy Bates is his favorite character of all the characters that he's created. And thank God that Kathy Bates played her, because it is a role that she was just born to play. If you haven't read or watched Misery, please do. It's an amazing movie and an amazing book. And believe it or not, this is the only Oscar that an adaptation of a Stephen King book has ever won. I'm surprised that it's the only nominee for this movie. It's crazy good. But the fact that the author of The Shining and The Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile and Stand By Me and a lot of other, books that have become insane classics, this is the only one that has ever won an Oscar. That's crazy. But Kathy DeBates totally earns it. So she has to kind of, Annie Wilkes almost has like split personality. She's got to switch between being, a caring nurse, a geeky fangirl, and also a heartless, cold psychopath. While she's doing all these things, she manages to keep all these aspects of her character's personality, locked up in this single being in such an amazing way. She's just giving an absolutely masterful performance. She totally carries the movie and steals the show. So I'm really glad she won this award. Now, the nominees for Best Actor in a Leading Role are Richard Harris in The Field, Gerard Depardieu in Cyrano de Bergerac, Robert De Niro in Awakenings, Kevin Costner in Dances with Wolves, and Jeremy Irons in Reversal of Fortune. Now, Ray Liotta in Goodfellas isn't here. I think he is very, very good in that movie, though. Not the best performance in that movie. Joe Pesci steals it. And it ironically feels kind of like a role that was written for Leonardo DiCaprio, but it was before his time, so they went with Ray Liotta. But Ray Liotta is very memorable, does a really good job. So I just wanted to mention him before we get into the actual nominees, starting with Gerard Depardieu in Cyrano de Bergerac. A poet, a swordsman, a soldier, and a romantic, Cyrano de Bergerac is a very versatile person, and Gerard Depardieu plays him with a lot of care and beauty. Forced to love someone who is in love with another, he expresses his love for her by writing letters to her that are officially from her lover. Now, I think the opening scene with Cyrano heckling the play, I think tells us a lot about his character, and I think Gerard Depardieu does a great job kind of being that attention seeker, because, Cyrano's got like this huge, nose, and that kind of forces him to be in the spotlight. Maybe he wouldn't actually be a type of person who wants to be the center of attention, but because of his nose, he's almost forced into it. It's inevitable. It's not really avoidable, so he ends up embracing it, and that's why you get him kind of showing off in the opening scene. I just think it really makes a really layered and believable character, because it's not really explained for us. It's just there in the movie, and you can kind of put together that's the cause. And I think overall, he embraces it and makes everyone around him laugh, except for those he's deprecating, which is often sometimes even himself. But overall, yeah, Gerard, he does a really great, tasteful, very satisfying performance. So it's cool to see him here. Okay, Robert De Niro in Awakenings. I'm going to be spoiling this movie here. So go watch the movie, and also this is kind of ends up just being a general spoiler warning for all the movies I talk about. That's why I definitely recommend watching them beforehand. There's a very real chance that these get spoiled. Now, with some stuff like visual effects or makeup, it's less. That stuff like that might not always end up really spoiling the big stuff in a movie. But once we get into the acting and writing awards, the odds of a movie getting spoiled are higher. So just watch these videos at your own risk. But watch the movies beforehand. You'll probably have a better time and a more informed opinion watching these videos. But without further ado, Robert De Niro in Awakenings is amazing. Of all the nominees here that I've seen, he's my favorite. He's who I would have voted for. He plays this guy who has been in a vegetative state for 30 years, and then ends up being healed of that temporarily, and we just get to see the humanity of him as he appreciates the little things in life that we don't. He just longs for more, and where he really ends up shining, that's already enough for like a really great performance, is someone coming out of like this long stage vegetative state. But once he starts degrading back into it, that's like slowly, that's when he gives the really heartbreaking performance. It just brings out the humanity of it all, and I think he just nailed it on the head. I think he's so good in this movie. All right, now Kevin Costner in Dances with Wolves. Although I did say that Mary McDonnell and Graham Greene. I said that I couldn't really give a very in-depth analysis of their performance because they're supporting roles. I do feel like because Kevin Costner is the lead, he has a greater screen presence, and the movie focuses on him more, so he inherently sticks in the memory for a longer period of time. So I do believe I can give a better actual analysis of Kevin Costner's performance in Dances with Wolves than I can the supporting actors in this movie. So, with that being said, I don't think his performance is as crazy as some of the ones we just talked about, although it is really good. It's a great character that we can kind of follow and root for. He's very likable, easy to root for, and it's cool to see him build up trust and community with those around him and the Native Americans. I just think that some of the other performances here, especially Robert De Niro, have a bit more going for them. Alrighty now, the nominees for Best Screenplay written directly for the screen are Metropolitan, Green Card, Avalon, Alice, and Ghost. Let's begin with Metropolitan. So I just gotta say, I don't really like this movie's screenplay. First of all, just none of the characters are likable at all. And when a movie, this is a screenplay movie, it's just kind of, the whole thing is just kind of the characters talking to each other. So when it's such a character-focused movie, you gotta have some characters that you can be drawn to, and they're just not here. They're all so pretentious. They all think they have the answers. It's so soapboxy and preachy. It just made all the characters, I can't stand them. It's impossible to stand. There's some romantic drama with there's a love triangle, this person like this person, but I simply don't get into it because I can't wrap my head around why any of these people would be attracted to any of the other people. Quite frankly, I just don't really think there's any chemistry, even when the movie wants me to believe that there is. I don't even know why they allegedly find joy or pleasure in each other's company. I can't even wrap my mind around why they're all friends. I know I'm just roasting this friend group at this point, but pretty much they're always getting together and hanging out and spending time with each other like friends do at these parties, if you can really even call them that. But I'm just like, why? Like, are you guys really having a good time? Because I'm not. Now, the winner of this award is Ghost. And while I think this movie has actually a really creative concept going for it, there's a fatal error conceptually that is really hard to avoid, and I think this movie kind of falls into it. And that's this. So a really good movie can take the audience and put them in the shoes of the main character and kind of put them in their perspective. Now, this movie takes the main character and makes them part of the audience instead. And it doesn't really work as well going this way because they're just given such a passive role. Even though they're the character we're following along, it's not even always like we're watching the movie. It's like we're watching him react to the movie that he's in. He largely is reacting to the stuff going on, which gives him not much of a role to do. Now, I'm not judging the performance, I'm judging the screenplay, but this is what the screenplay is doing to the main character. Now, I will give that he is able to talk to the medium, to Whoopi Goldberg, and influence the plot through her. So he does play a role in the movie, but there's also so many scenes where he's talking to no one in particular. Like, there's this scene where he's like, his wife is going to open the door and he's like, don't open the door, he's a murderer on the other side or whatever. And I'm like, at this point in the story, he knows she can't hear him, so he's just saying stuff to the audience that we already know. And honestly, just the fact that it won is kind of like, really? I don't think it deserved it. Although the only other nominee I've seen is Metropolitan, which I also just really don't want to win. So yeah, I guess it was kind of a lose-lose with these two, but surely one of the other three nominees is good, but I can't really speak for those. Now, the nominees for Best Screenplay based on material from another medium is Reversal of Fortune, The Grifters, Goodfellas, Awakenings, and Dances with Wolves. Now, the only snub I really want to mention beforehand is Misery. Just the fact that this movie got one nominee sucks because this is a great movie, but it would have been cool to see in screenplay. But with all that being said, let's talk about Goodfellas. So Goodfellas does an absolutely masterful job of showing you the world of the mafia, the underworld of the mafia, in a way that shows not only the high living excitement of it all, but also how degraded and destructive it really can be. Even the narration, which can, when done poorly, can feel like lazy exposition, but it's done in a really tactful POV, so it ends up feeling like a really valuable time saver more than anything else. Also, the dialogue just feels so fluid and natural and real. That's, one of the best things that a screenplay can do for a movie is just make believable dialogue. And all the interactive scenes in this movie with all the characters just feel so legit and fluid. So when I first watched this movie in high school, I didn't think there was too much of a plot, but upon my second viewing, which I watched it just last year, it really showed me it's less about being an intricate story and more about exploring this character and the underworld that he lives in. It's my favorite screenplay of the year now, so I think it should have won. I think it's really, really good. Okay, now Awakenings just reminds us of all the pleasures in life, both big and small, that we all just have at our fingertips, but don't appreciate what we take for granted. It's a heartbreaking story about humanity that, I'll compare it to like a bird that just learned to fly and then has its wings one by one slowly trimmed away. It's honestly kind of devastating, but a really great movie that I would highly recommend you watch. Now, Dances with Wolves is admittedly a story that at this point we've kind of seen done a lot with unofficial adaptations of it, pretty much, like movies like Pocahontas and Avatar. But Dances with Wolves is the original, kind of this tale of, befriending the natives and betraying the, army that is there to, displace them. Of the three films I just listed, it happens to be the best one, and it just kind of shows the unity and friendship in humanity and how that is more important than cultural and political borders that we often abide by. But overall, yeah, Goodfellas would still be my pick. Now, the directing nominees for this year are Reversal of Fortune, The Grifters, Goodfellas, The Godfather Part 3, and Dances with Wolves. Let's begin with Goodfellas. Now, this is the first Martin Scorsese movie we've talked about on this channel, and pretty much this entire episode I've been saying nothing but good things about Goodfellas, and I'm not going to stop now. Scorsese delivered one of the most iconic crime films of all time. You could probably call it one of the most iconic films of all time. It probably is the most iconic film that we've talked about on this channel, apart from 2001: A Space Odyssey, arguably. But all that being said, it's all because of Martin Scorsese's amazing direction that it ended up the way it is. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. It's really, really good. Martin Scorsese is a great director. We're going to be seeing a lot of him, but this is the first that we've talked about, and it's kind of fitting that it's also the movie that is largely considered by many to be his best movie. Okay, now let's talk about The Godfather Part 3. Now, Martin Scorsese is kind of the big crime movie filmmaker. Francis Ford Coppola is another filmmaker that's largely known for his crime films, but mostly the first two Godfather movies, not so much the third one as much. Now, there is a lot to appreciate in this movie, and there's some decisions that Coppola made, however, that I think bring it down a bit. The primary one being casting his own daughter to play Michael's daughter in the movie. Sofia Coppola's performance is really just the worst thing about this movie, which pretty much makes it the worst thing about the entire Godfather trilogy. It's just an awful example of nepotism failing miserably, and Francis Ford Coppola really should have known better, quite frankly. Okay, let's talk about Dances with Wolves. While you couldn't really describe me as a Kevin Costner fan in particularly, I can't pretend that I think this movie isn't good. Like, it's beautiful, it's really well directed, it flows well, the action scenes are just very riveting. If Kevin Costner was going to win an Oscar for a movie, I am glad that it was this one, because of the ones from him that I've seen, it's probably his best movie. Alright, now the nominees for Best Foreign Language Film are Open Doors, The Nasty Girl, Judo, Cyrano de Bergerac, and Journey of Hope. Let's talk about Cyrano de Bergerac, which is admittedly the only one here that I've seen. It's a tragic story, but one that, when handled right, can be really touching. I can't really say if this should have won because it is the only one I've seen. I know I really got to lock in on international films in future episodes, but I did really enjoy this movie. Finally, the Best Picture nominees for this year are Goodfellas, The Godfather Part 3, Ghost, Awakenings, and Dances with Wolves. Now, the only snub I'm really going to throw in here is Misery, which is easily one of my favorite movies of the year. There's other movies from this year that are really well-beloved classics like Home Alone, but Misery for me is the hardest-hitting movie that should have made an appearance in more than just the Best Lead Actress, but I digress. Now let's talk about my favorite movie of the year, Goodfellas, which I've already really talked about all the different reasons that this movie is great, so rather than dwelling on them, I'm just going to say this is my favorite movie of the year. It's the movie that should have won Best Picture. Yeah, Goodfellas. It's Goodfellas. You guys know Goodfellas. You've seen it. Now let's talk about The Godfather Part 3. The only Godfather movie not to win Best Picture is The Godfather Part 3. And quite frankly, it's not even the best mafia movie that got nominated for Best Picture this year. Even though I'll admit, I think the reason that this movie gets hated on as much as it does is because of the behemoths that it follows more so than its own merits. We're kind of meeting this movie on the level of the first two Godfather movies, and not any movie that has those expectations. It's just bound to it's The Godfather. How do you live up to those expectations? And don't mention Part 2 because Part 2 it did it somehow, but yeah, no movie should be expected to do as good as the first two Godfather movies. That being said, I do think it's a good movie. Now, The Godfather, the first one, that's generally regarded as the best movie of all time, and The Godfather Part 2 is just kind of known as the movie that lived up to the expectations set by the best movie of all time, the first one. I'm not saying it's the best movie of all time. I'm just saying that it's more than most movies I've seen it cited as the best. And with good reason, it's great. Now, The Godfather Part 3, unfortunately, is left to just kind of be known as the worst of the three. And while it's not really fair to it, it's also somewhat inevitable just because it's a Godfather movie. It's hard to get around that. This movie manages to feel like a legacy sequel before those were really a thing. That's more of a modern cinematic phenomenon. But it's definitely a movie that watching it, like, okay, this movie and the people making it know that, it's part of a legacy. The Godfather has been around cinema culture for long enough to, everyone knows the impact that it made and the incredible giant that it was. So it unfortunately doesn't match the legacy of the first two movies, even though if you just look at it on its own merits, it's not bad. Not saying it should win Best Picture or anything. I personally wouldn't have even nominated it. It's not in my top 5 favorite movies of the year, but it is pretty good. Now, Ghost is my least favorite of the nominees, quite easily, I would say. It's not a movie that I think is doing anything that deserves a Best Picture nomination. It's conceptually unique and funny at times, but not a movie I really ever plan on revisiting. Now, of all these nominees, the movie with the biggest heart is Awakenings. And Awakenings also happens to be my second favorite movie of these nominees, just second after Goodfellas, although it is a very close second place tie between Awakenings and the actual Best Picture winner, Dances with Wolves. So let's talk about that. So Dances with Wolves winning Best Picture is a decision that I think generally gets looked down upon just because Goodfellas is better. And while I do agree, I gotta say Dances with Wolves is one of the best movies of the year. It's at least one of my favorite movies of the year. It's, I would call it the grandest. It feels very large, like you're watching something truly epic. The cinematography, the music, the action is great. Even if I do like Goodfellas more, Dances with Wolves is a movie that I'll definitely be revisiting in the future, and it's just a really great watch all around. All right, now thank you guys so much for tuning in to this episode of the Academy Critic. I want to let you guys know that the next Academy Critic episode is going to be covering the 67th Academy Awards ceremony, which honors films released in 1994. So watch movies from 1994, form your own opinions, have fun, and I'll see you in the next one.